We are aware that we have a number of new participants that are engaging with the design for the first time. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So this is an industry-led design. So we have been collaboratively working with parties from all across the industry and within design working groups that have been running now since November. So all of the artifacts that are out for review at the moment have undergone several iterations of review within the design working groups. And a number of those artifacts have been conditionally approved by the Design Advisory Group, DAG, subject to resolution of the known issues and dependencies. We believe that those issues and dependencies as part of that conditional approval process have been resolved within the artifacts that have been published. But in terms of conditional approval, what this really means is that the design working groups and DAG believed that the core elements of the design were stable and met the requirements of the target operating model. And I guess what that means in terms of review comments coming back in is that there are those elements of the design that have already been conditionally approved aren't subject to change, notwithstanding if we discover a material issue with those elements. We will obviously take those under consideration. But really what we're looking for as part of the review feedback is whether the design does meet the requirements of the agreed target operating model and adheres to the agreed design principles. And essentially, does the design, is it sufficient enough to enable you to start your detailed design activities within your organisations and any associated sourcing of software and services? All comments are welcome as part of the review. But we are asking that comments are specific and constructive, and wherever possible must include detail of your suggested change to the design, as well as the impact of not making that change. That just helps us as part of the comment triage process to prioritise comments and understand the impact of changes that are being proposed. Any comments that we receive that haven't got sufficient detail to enable us to make a change to the design won't be entered into the comment resolution process. But that said, we do absolutely recognise that there will be comments which are requiring clarification around elements of the design. As you'll hopefully be aware, we have run a series of design playback sessions which were designed to hopefully answer as many of those questions as we could. And all of the questions that were captured within those sessions are being consolidated and will be available on the website and the collaboration base. So we do encourage you, when you're submitting comments, if you have got clarification questions, that you refer to those question and answers and refer back to the playback sessions in the first instance to see whether we've answered that question already. If we do receive comments coming back in by the comments logs, which are clarifications, we have put a process in place whereby, although we're not submitting them into the comment resolution process, we will be managing a clarification process, and the PPC team will be on hand to support, helping to direct you to where you can find the answer, and making sure all of those questions do get answered. The other thing to mention was just a reminder, really, that this is a collaborative effort to what I'm sure you will recognise quite challenging timescales, and the design team are facilitating this across many industry parties. So we do ask that when you're submitting comments, they be respectful and professional, just to allow us to focus on what it is that we're suggesting needs to be changed. And And then finally, I guess just on this slide, so thank you to those of you who have already started to submit your comments. That's incredibly helpful for us. We are working to very tight timescales, and it's really helpful to get a view of those comments early to gauge the feedback that's coming back in. You can submit comments at any point between now and when the comment window closes on the 16th of September. And please feel free, you don't need to, organisations don't need to submit one single comment log. You can feed across comments in batches, whatever works for you. But we do ask, if you, as you're doing your reviews, if you do spot anything that you think is a significant issue, please let us know straight away so that we can start looking at that. Okay, so that's just, yes, Kevin.
We've no questions on the slide up, but Tom Chevalier has his hand up there. Tom, if you want to ask your question, we can take it now.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. The Q&A stuff, while I appreciate that went on, if the design baseline, well, presumably the Q&A do not form part of the design baseline. Therefore, anything that's been answered in there needs to be incorporated into the design baseline if it's ambiguous or unclear.
Yes, so yes, so if we've had questions come back through the playback sessions where we know that the artifacts haven't made the answer clear, yes, we've picked those up. We would pick those up as minor corrections within the process, and we would feed those through into the comments logs. So yes, you're absolutely right. There will be genuine questions where it's a misunderstanding of the process, and so it's an explanatory, just giving a little bit more detail. But where we've identified where we actually need to make it clearer within the artifact itself, we will process those as comments. Yes.
And we may end up making comments on those as well, because if it's unclear, even though the Q&A has sort of given an answer, we need it to be clear in the requirements or the baseline stuff. So there may be a bit of an overlap there, but that's fine. Thank you.
No worries.
No other questions at this time, Claire, crack on.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so moving on then to, so this diagram, which I apologise is quite small, but I won't labour too much time on this. So this is the plan on a page for the comment resolution period. As you can see, we've got quite challenging timescales there. So we've got a 6-week period with design due to be baselined on the 28th of October. So what we've done is try to put a framework in place and split the process into 5 distinct stages. So I will come on to the more detail around these stages on the next slide, but I guess just to call out on this slide the key dates for people to be aware of. So the comment window closes on the 16th of September. Between the 19th and the 30th of September, the MHHS Design Team will be doing the triaging of comments and updating the comment responses. Comment responses will then be published on the 3rd of October. And then between the 3rd of October and the 14th of October, we enter a period whereby we will be into issue resolution for any issues that we've identified with the design. And also there will be opportunity for people to object or raise objections to any of the comment responses that we've provided. I'll come on to this in more detail in the next slide. We will also be running dissensus forums within that period. This is where we've got non-consensus in comments that have come back from industry parties where we've got conflicting views. So we will be running forums to try to achieve consensus on some of those items. The deadline then on the 17th of October, we will be publishing the updated revised artifacts. They will be issued back to industry for an assurance review, and simultaneously that is the point that we will submit the artifacts to DAG to begin their baseline review. and the M5 baseline DAG meeting takes place on the 28th of October. So those are the key dates on the slide. I'll move on to the next slide and just talk through some of those stages in a little bit more detail. So the first stage is probably where I'll spend most of my time talking through how this process is going to work. So in stage 1, we've got the comment triage and resolution. So all comments will be reviewed and allocated to a triage category. I'll come on to those in a second. Through that triage process, we will look to identify design issues and key themes that are coming back out of the comment feedback. And we will prioritise those issues based on materiality and the level of change required to the design. We will also, at that point, be updating the comment responses to provide rationale and or the proposed changes that we intend to make to the design. During that period, in terms of yourselves, the engagement that would be required is for any comment owners where we require further information on a comment or further clarification around what is meant by a comment. We will be coming back to you to gain more information, and there may be instances where we may need you to be available just to discuss comments directly with the team, just so that we fully understand what's being articulated. If I just skip on to the next slide and then I'll come back and go through the other stages. This just gives a bit of a breakdown of our triage categories. Now we are testing the triage process at the moment. These are the initial categories that we've proposed. This is to try and enable us to effectively manage all of the comments that are coming back and enter them into a defined route so that we can manage them all in parallel, as it were. We may find that comments don't fit neatly into each category, so these are subject to change, but this is the best view, we think, at the moment of how we can categorise some of these comments. So if I just run through the categories. So initially we've got what we're terming as clarification questions. So this is what I touched on briefly earlier. So we absolutely recognise that we will have comments coming back where people are seeking clarification around the design. To Tom's point, some of those may fall into the cosmetic or minor change category if it's that we recognise that it's not clear within the design artefacts themselves. Then we would pick those up under cosmetic minor changes and make it clearer within the documentation. But where they are genuine questions where someone just wants to understand a little bit more detail around what's being described, those won't be submitted into the comment resolution process. So on the comments log, they will show as closed. However, they will be transferred onto the clarification log, and the PPC team will be supporting us to direct participants as to where they can find the answer to those questions. We've then got a category around further information required. So this, as I mentioned, is where we've got comments where we don't fully understand what's being articulated. And in these instances, those wouldn't be accepted immediately, but we would be contacting the comment owner to ask for additional information. We then move on to cosmetic or minor changes. So these are comments where it requires a change to the artifact, but it doesn't actually change elements of the design that have previously been agreed. So these are things like alignment, corrections of any errors that have been identified within the documents that wouldn't cause any significant change, but that would just make the documents clearer. So those would be accepted in the comments log, and the changes would be made to the design artifacts. We'll also be maintaining a change control log, which will be published at the same time that the revised artifacts are published, just to give clear traceability of what's actually changed. For minor changes, we're not intending to list out every minor change that's made, but what we would do in the change control log is actually refer back to the comments in the comment log, so there would be full traceability there. We then move on to proposed design changes. So these are comments that require changes to the elements of the design that has previously been agreed by the working group, but will be ones where we don't envisage that there would be any particular contention around the change. It's a fairly logical change. We won't make the change, apply the change to the artifacts at that point. What we would do in this instance is provide the response to the comment that described the proposed change that we intended to make. That would be issued back out for review on the 3rd of October, and you are free to raise any objections if you don't agree with that proposed change. The next category would be design issues. So these are where we've got a comment that indicates a gap or an issue that has not previously been considered through the design working groups and would require further discussion with industry. So in these instances, we would be raising a design issue and we would be adding those design issues to the baseline design issues log, which is published already in the design of artifact tracker on the collaboration base. And we would be prioritising those issues for discussion with industry to assess the impact and determine what the resolution steps would be. We then come on to dissensus issues. So dissensus is a word we invented, I apologise. But dissensus is essentially where we've got non-consensus across comments. So we've got comments that are in direct opposition with other feedback that we've received, or in direct opposition with the position previously agreed by the design working groups. In these instances, we would notify the comment owner that the comment's been entered into the dissensus process, and we intend to run dissensus forums whereby participants will be asked to summarise their position and rationale, and then there will be industry meetings to discuss those positions and try to achieve consensus on those items. And the final category, as one of our triage categories, is rejected. Rejected comments would be where we have a comment that doesn't align with the agreed design principles or with the target operating model or with approved elements of the design, or comments where it requires a significant change to the design and the materiality isn't significant enough to warrant us making that change. So those are the types of comments that would be rejected. For any rejected comments, we will provide a rationale. And again, the PPC team will be on supporting us to have direct discussion with participants to make sure that they understand why the comments are being rejected and what the rationale is around that. So those are the triage categories. If I flick back to the next slide, I can just give a little bit more. If I can flip back, there we go. So if I just talk a little bit more about the stages that follow that triage process then. So on the 3rd of October, we will publish the consolidated comments log, and all comments will have been assigned to one of those triage categories and will have a comment response. Responses, in terms of engagement from yourselves, it would be to review those comment responses and the proposed changes for any design changes and to raise any objections. So objections will be, we will have an objection form that people can fill out and submit to us, and we will be running drop-in sessions to have direct discussion with people where they're raising objections to any of our required change to try to resolve that objection. Drop-in sessions will be taking place between the 6th and the 11th of October. So we will schedule placeholders for those, and people can book a slot to come and talk to the design team around any of those objections. Simultaneously in that period, we will also be running the design issue impact assessment sessions. So these will be held for high priority design issues. And as I mentioned, this will be to determine the impact of the issue and the materiality, and understand the resolution steps that are required in order to resolve that issue. The purpose of these sessions will be to determine whether that issue actually impacts the M5 baseline, or whether it is an issue that moves on to a work-off plan post M5. So we will be again scheduling sessions. I believe we're going to set these up through Eventbrite, so we will have placeholders there for people to register a slot to attend those design impact assessment sessions. As you can probably appreciate, it's going to be challenging to try to get communications out as quickly as possible around what issues will be discussed at which meetings. So we will be trying to do that throughout the triage process and trying to identify key themes of issues so that we can let people know as early as possible what topics will be discussed in which sessions. Those sessions will be taking place on the 3rd and 4th of October. We envisage at the moment that we'll have placeholder sessions in for morning and afternoon sessions across both of those days. Moving on to the next stage. So this is around consensus. As you'll be aware, the objective of the design is to try to achieve consensus across all industry parties in order for us to baseline the design. The consensus process we have run previously in previous tranches. We've made some slight changes going forward. So where we've got comments that are entering the consensus process, we will be contacting comment owners to notify them that they will need to raise a consensus form, which will essentially summarise their position and the rationale and any material impacts associated with their proposed change. We will then be running consensus forums on the 12th and 13th of October. These will be sessions for all industry participants to attend, and where comment owners will present their positions at the forum for discussion, and we will facilitate trying to achieve consensus on those items. So once we've gone through all of those processes, assuming that we've managed to resolve all of the issues and or determine the next steps for each issue, we will, throughout all of this, be updating the design artifacts to reflect all of the changes. The comments logs will be continuously updated as we close out comments, and then we'll publish the revised design artifacts on and the associated control log on the 17th of October. So from the 17th of October, we'll be asking you to review the change control log and the changes to the design artifacts to provide assurance that the agreed changes have been reflected in the correctly in those documents. There will be an assurance forum on the 19th of October where any issues can be discussed. Post the 19th of October, any concerns should be raised with your DAG constituency representative, and the DAG baseline meeting will take place on the 28th of October. So I think that is a whistle-stop tour of the process. So Kevin, I don't know if you've got any questions.
We have a few questions, Claire, so thanks for that. Two here from Tom, just asking, so during the phase of reviewing and changing the design artifacts, will a redlined version be published in real time so we can see all what has been changed? And as a follow-up to that, you know, what we may determine in the program as a minor change may not be in the view of some program participants. So all changes should be published, and a redlined version would give us clarity on what has been changed.
So there's not an intention to publish redline versions. The main reason for that is when we've looked previously at redline versions, they're incredibly difficult to view. So the option that we've taken is that we will make a log of everything that's changed, keep a log of everything that's changed in the change control log. To the point around the classification of minor or cosmetic changes, these really we are anticipating would be corrections of typos, alignment of language and those kind of things. So we wouldn't anticipate that those would cause any conflict, as it were.
Yeah.
If it was anything over and above a true kind of cosmetic change, then we would make a log of, keep a log of what that change was against that artifact in the change control log. So we wouldn't publish redline versions, but we would have a tracked change in the change control log that would be published.
Thank you. Katie, do you have a follow-up to that question? I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, please. So for the ISD entity description document, as an example, there were quite a few cosmetic changes made between version 0.5 and the published version 3, and we had to go through them with quite a fine-tooth comb because we'd started building this database out in our system. Are we able to ask for redlined documents by exception for those that we expect would have quite a few minor changes in them or not?
I can take that away, Katie, and check with the design team. Yes, let me take that away as a question.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Katie. Another question from you on the slide there asking, how will design issues identified during the transition discussions post M5 be actioned in the baseline documents?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that because the transition.
If I may, sorry, it's Warren Fulton here. So if I may jump in there, so I think once it's baseline, then it's baseline. So they would need to follow a change control process to update the artifacts and obviously make sure that industry is comfortable with those changes.
Cheers, Warren. I thought that might be the case. Thank you.
Yeah. So absolutely. And so yeah, that's obviously what we're trying to get to, trying to baseline so everyone agrees on the baseline, and then after that baseline goes into change control. Cool.
Super. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Claire. Final question there on the slide up. Just asking, in terms of the forums which are planned in weeks 3 and 4, can the date/times of these be published? Obviously, the actual subjects may be identified shortly before the meeting. Claire, me and you are working on that, aren't we?
Absolutely, yes. So we should be getting placeholders out this week. So yes, and clearly some of the topics we will notify people as soon as we're able to, but we will get placeholder invites out so that everybody knows when they are.
Super, thank you very much. No more questions on the Slido. If anyone on the call has a question, feel free to raise your hand and ask it. Otherwise, I'll hand back over to Claire to wrap up. Silence is golden, Claire. I think you're good to go.
Thank you very much. That was short and sweet. Well, thank you very much for your time. If anybody does have any questions, then feel free to reach out and let us know. But yes, hopefully that's made things clearer for everybody, and we look forward to receiving your comments. So thank you very much for your time, guys.
Thanks for your time, folks. Really
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.